Hey, what's up you guys? I am going to be showing you my eyeshadow palette collection. I'm pretty proud of my collection. Just so you see my hand, you know I exist. I pretty much have all palettes that I really love. I have some that I've gotten in subscription boxes that aren't like my absolute favorite, but I keep everything pretty organized and I do switch out my palettes all the time and try to use a different one. So I am pretty proud of the collection that I have. And yeah, I'm just gonna get started and show you what I've got. So I'll show you at the end how I organize it, but for now I'm just gonna go with the first drawer for my vanity, which has all my Too Faced palettes. So Too Faced is one of my favorite brands when it comes to eyeshadow palettes. Not only is it because of the packaging, but also I really do like the formula. But this is, I believe, the first high-end eyeshadow palette that I ever bought, and I can't tell if I'm just so familiar with the formula since I used it so much that I just know how to work with it, which is why I enjoy it so much. I think if I started with a different formula, like maybe Anastasia Beverly Hills, this formula wouldn't be as exciting to me, but this is one of my favorite palettes. I always thought people didn't give this one a good enough chance because everyone on YouTube was collecting palettes, and then there was the regular chocolate bar, then the semi-sweet, and then this one came out, and they were decluttering it basically untouched, but this was literally my favorite. The packaging is gorgeous. You can tell that I've used it a lot. I think this is the only Too Faced palette that I actually hit pan on. But yeah, I love these shades. I love the pinks in it. Everything about it. I love the transition shades. I don't think I like transition shades in any other palette as much as I like this one. Like I like this color right here. This is one of my favorites. This is like one of my favorite transition shades ever. It's just a perfect toned palette for me, and I love the little hearts. So yeah, I just love this palette. It's getting old. I would replace it, but I know it would just start going bad, and because I have so many palettes, I wouldn't use it as much. So yeah, until it smells weird or anything like that, I will be keeping this. Next, I have the Too Faced White Chocolate Bar palette. The packaging is beautiful. I will say that I am not the biggest fan of this palette. It's not that the shades don't show up on me, because I know some people have that issue. It's just that none of the tones make sense to me. Like something about this, I do the usual, you know, put something in the crease, in the outer corner, and just a quick shimmer on the lid. And for some reason, no matter what I use on here, the undertone of the crease shades does not match with the shimmer, so I just can't make it look right. I don't know if it's just me and I need to play around with this more, but I'm just not a fan of this palette, unfortunately. I do like it because in my collection it just looks really pretty, but yeah, this is one of the Too Faced palettes. I think one of my least favorite ones. It's just unfortunate with this one. Up next, I have the famous Sweet Peach palette. This one I wanted so bad. I could not wait to get it, and then I finally did a lot later than most people did, and I bought it from the Ulta website. And initially I thought it was a fake because this was during a time when people were saying that they were buying like fake versions of the palette and then returning it to Ulta. So it didn't really smell like peaches. So I was like, oh my gosh, what if I got one of the fake ones? So then I returned it and ended up getting one from the Too Faced website, but it's kind of slightly broken. You probably can't tell, but it just doesn't close right. Like it lifts on the sides. And that is just like so frustrating. I know it's such a minor detail, but when you get a palette that you've been waiting on for so long, it is a little frustrating. And this one didn't really smell like peaches that much either, so I'm realizing that's just the way the palette is. But I do like this palette. I thought I would like it more. I do end up with a similar look each time because I go for the lighter shades. If I'm reaching for a Too Faced palette, I'm usually going for an everyday look, so I don't usually reach for these darker shades, so that's my own fault. But yeah, I end up with kind of like just a similar look every time. So I need to play around with this a little more. I will say with Too Faced shadows, I do steer clear of these kind of like darker, I don't know if you can tell, but it has some glitter in there. For some reason, I don't know how to work with those shades because I don't necessarily want to put them somewhere where you're not supposed to put like glitter shadows according to, you know, whoever makes up the makeup rules these days. But yeah, those are the kind of shadows from Too Faced that I kind of steer clear from, which makes all the lighter shades really all I use. but I need to just play around with them a little more. I feel like they're a little messy. I don't know if it's just me and my fear of using them, but yeah, something about like glitter deep shades that Too Faced does, I'm not the biggest fan of. But yeah, I do like this palette. I do want to play around with it a little more, but it is beautiful packaging. Then I have the Clover palette, which is just beautiful. I believe this was an Ulta exclusive. I'm not sure. I don't know if they even still have it. I know they have things from the Clover collection, so possibly. But this is a very pretty palette. I personally love this palette. I think it's so unique. I think I look at it and I understand what I want to do. Like I find the shades that I like. So yeah, I really do like this palette. I need to use it a little more. I will say that the last few times I used it, I wasn't as impressed as I used to be. I don't know why, but yeah, I do like this palette. I just think it's very unique for Too Faced, and I mean, as unique as you can get with Too Faced with, you know, the purple shade that you always get. But yeah, I really do like this palette and I think it's very, very cute. Next, I have the Chocolate Gold, and I will say this has been my favorite eyeshadow palette that I own, and this isn't even my top favorite formula, but it is my favorite eyeshadow palette that I've ever owned. Now, I will say that as time went on, these shadows seem a little drier than I remember, but that might be just because it's getting older, or I just haven't used the formula in a while and it's always been like that. But this is the perfect palette for me. I love really shiny lids. I want it to be glitter or metallic. A regular shimmer is good enough, but I prefer something a little more intense. And this is what this palette gives to me. So I have my shade to set my eye. I have some transition shades, a black. Like it's everything you need. And then you pop up a little shimmer. And these are honestly beautiful. Like, let me swatch one for you. But these are so intense. I hope it focuses on me for you. But yeah, they're just very, very, very intense metallics, which I love. And this is one of those palettes that will get you compliments on your eye look. It's just beautiful. Whenever I was going out anywhere, I would always reach for this palette. I think it's just one of the best palettes that Too Faced has come out with. Next, I have the Natural Matte Palette. I will say I don't use all matte palettes that often just because I do like a shimmer on the lid, but I do have Stila Glitter and Glows or the ColourPop Super Shock shadows that I can always use on the lid, so it doesn't completely mess up a palette for me if it doesn't have any shimmers. But yeah, this is the all matte one. I believe I got this in a BoxyCharm, which I was so excited about. I get so excited whenever we get a Too Faced palette from BoxyCharm. But yeah, it's a nice palette. I haven't used it that much. We didn't get this that long ago, so yeah, a lot of these palettes are newer to me because this year there's been so many insane sales. So yeah, it's a nice palette. The packaging of Too Faced palettes is just, it's so beautiful. It smells good. It's like heavy. Yeah, I love this palette. And of course I have the Natural Eyes palette, which has the shimmers in it, and this is also a very gorgeous palette. I like the tones of this palette. I like that I have like a bigger shade to set my lid. It's just a very pretty palette as well. And of course, packaging again is just beautiful. Next, I have the Just Peachy Mattes palette. This palette also is all matte, and I will say that I don't use red tones as much anymore. I mean, there was that huge craze for red tones when Modern Renaissance came out. Every company wanted to make a palette with red tones. And I use them all the time, nonstop. Even before Modern Renaissance, I was very into like a deep red in the outer corner, almost like borderline purple. And then I got red hair. I dyed my hair red, and that was just too much red, so I stopped doing it. And I think I just overdid it. So I want to get back to it because it was one of my favorite eye looks for me, but I did it so often and red tones became so popular that I just kind of moved on from it. But this is a very pretty palette. Again, it smells good, and this is actually newer to my collection. I know most people have had this forever, but yeah, this one's a little newer for me. Then I have this Palm Springs Dreams. So this palette is actually called the Cocktail Party eyeshadow palette. I don't know why people call it the Palm Springs palette. Maybe that is what it is on the website, but yeah. This I bought for the packaging and because it's of course Too Faced, which has some of my favorite shadows, and I will say I'm highly disappointed in this. I don't know which palette I like less. This is probably my second least favorite. I think the White Chocolate Bar is worse, but this just, it's fine, but this dark brown right here is a little patchy, and since it is the deepest shade that you have in this palette and kind of what you need to make this palette work, or at least for me the way I want it to, it being patchy and hard to work with makes me not want to use this palette. So this is an unfortunate one. This isn't up to par, I think, with a lot of their shadows. I mean, the packaging is gorgeous, but yeah, unfortunately this did not work out for me. Next I have, this is the Sparkling Pineapple eyeshadow palette. I don't usually go for little mini palettes like this, but this one I just had to get. I think I got it at TJ Maxx actually. And this is one of those palettes, I think 2 in my collection, where someone was wearing this palette and I had no idea, and I complimented their eyeshadow and they said it was this palette, and then there was a second time it happened and it was this palette. So whenever you're complimenting someone's eyeshadow or really enjoy it and they say it's a specific palette, you want it because you're like, okay, clearly I like the way the eyeshadow looks. So that's why I got this, and I'm not disappointed in it at all. I love this palette. I like the tones in it. It's just perfect. So this is like my favorite little mini palette, and probably the only mini palette that I really have. Next I have the Born This Way, the Natural Nudes palette from Too Faced. The packaging is a little boring, but I think they were going for a less childish look, just for kind of an essentials palette for people that really just want those like main shades that they need, nothing too fancy. I do like this palette. I like the way it's set up. I like, yeah, just the way they have the shimmers on opposite ends with the mattes that kind of correspond with them. And I really do like this palette. I do need to play around with it a little more, but yeah, I like this palette. I wish the packaging was more fun, but I understand that more people would be into a palette like this than necessarily like the fun, obnoxious ones. Up next, I have my Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes. So these are my favorite formula. Sort of. I just recently got a palette that is really, really good, but I'll talk about that later. But this has been my favorite formula for a while. I have clearly loved this palette, although this isn't really saying much because this is like the easiest palette to hit pan on ever. So as awesome as it is, to hit such major pan, it's really not that impressive. Initially, I didn't even like this palette because I was just getting into makeup and they were too pigmented for me. I didn't know how to work with them, but as I got better, this became my all-time favorite formula and favorite palette. But once I lost this shade, which was I was using to set my lid, and lost my favorite shimmer that I almost finished, it just kind of, I stopped using it as much. Up next, I have the Soft Glam palette. I thought this would be my favorite, but I still think I like the original Modern Renaissance more, just because it's a little more fun to play with. This gets more of like neutral looks, but I do like the deeper tones as well. I honestly have not played around with this as much as I should. I do like brown shadows, but I like more like purpley cool tone shades, kind of like this one. I'm more of a fan of things like that on my lid, so yeah, I do like this palette, and obviously the formula is great. Up next, I have the Norvina palette. This one is beautiful. I mean, the purple shades, everything about it, it's so glittery, so fun, and I really like the shimmers in this. The Soft Glam, I think, has more muted shimmers. This is more kind of the kind of formula I like, and yeah, everyone knows this palette. It's really great. Next, I have the Sultry palette, which the packaging is gorgeous. It glitters so nicely, but yeah, this is probably one of my favorite color stories when it comes to Anastasia Beverly Hills shadows. It just works for me. I like these tones. I like that it's more cool toned, and Anastasia Beverly Hills does an amazing job of having all the shades kind of mix well together. Like, you don't have to do a lot of thinking. They just work with each other. So yeah, I definitely love this palette. This is really recent for me. I think I bought it on Beauty Bay or something like that because I thought we would never find it again, but they brought it back for the holiday season. But yeah, this is an amazing palette. Next, I have the Aina palette, and I will say I thought I would like this more than I do. And these shades are just a little deep for me, and I don't reach for them as much. I need to play around with it a little more and hopefully enjoy it a little more, because I think this is my least favorite one that I own, which is unfortunate because it's such a beautiful palette. But yeah, I'll have to play around with it a little more. Next, I have the Riviera palette. I don't like the packaging of this, but I am obsessed with this palette. A lot of people don't enjoy this one as much or declutter it, and I am just obsessed. I don't have a lot of color in my collection because I don't use a lot of color. For me, one palette is good enough. And this one is just gorgeous. I got it for these two shades because I found them to be so unique. And because this is my favorite formula, I wanted a colorful palette in my favorite formula. And these like unique kind of shimmer shades are just beautiful. And yeah, I really, really, really do like them. Just having a yellow too. I love this palette. I really, really do. Up next, moving on from Anastasia Beverly Hills, we're gonna go just to some of my favorite palettes in general. So this is the Urban Decay Born to Run. This one I have not touched yet, I believe. I got one of these and it came shattered, so I tried the palette and then they sent me a new one. So I haven't touched this one in particular yet. But the reason this is my favorite isn't just because of the quality of the shades, because honestly I haven't used it enough to really get a good feel for it. I know I hear that it's inconsistent in quality, but the shades in general are very unique, like the tones of it, the deeper tones. But just the fact that it's travel themed. Traveling is everything to me. I was born in Europe and I went back almost every year, and something about just going somewhere new makes me feel so alive. And it really makes me so happy. So just the theme of this palette, I don't think it would be that good for travel just because it is so heavy, but just the idea of this palette makes me really, really happy. So yeah, I love it. Then we have this beautiful palette. This is the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde, and I don't have any other Huda palettes. I have one that looks very similar, like it's a dupe palette, but nothing actually from her. And I don't usually like packaging with like people's faces on it, but this I think is the prettiest palette ever. Not just the packaging, which is beautiful, but it's just like a fairy palette. Like, it's so gorgeous. I literally think this is the prettiest palette I own. The shades are very unique, they're pretty, like, this is just the perfect, like, little princess palette. I love this palette. It's so beautiful. I just want to look at it. Yeah, I love this palette. Up next, I have a few Tarte palettes. So these are actually new to my collection. I had the Tarte, what was it called? Like the palette, I'll put it up. I'll put a picture of it up, but I had that one and I did not enjoy the shadows. And I did read that that one just had a worse quality or worse shadows than the other ones. So I decided to give Tarte another chance and try some palettes out. So I got this one, and I do enjoy the palette, but I do think that Tarte shadows are just not my favorite. I think they're a little drier than what I'm used to, so I just don't enjoy the shadows as much as other formulas, but that does not mean they are bad. Not at all. It's just from not what I'm used to. I think a lot of Tarte products are just drier, and that's perfectly okay because some people are used to that. But I do like this palette. I just, I don't think I'm convinced about Tarte's formula just yet. I also have the Tartelette Toasted palette, and see, I like this one a little bit more. For some reason, this like formula blends so much smoother and I don't feel as dry. But yeah, I do like this palette as well. I like their packaging. Their packaging is very neat as well. Next, I have the Love, Trust, and Fairy Dust palette. Yes, I bought this because of packaging. I could not help myself. I do like the shades as well, but it's the packaging that sold me. I can't help it. Like, I do like the shades, but this is just gorgeous. I really like having this palette. I like displaying it, so yes, I really like this one. Next, I have the Urban Decay Naked Honey palette. I owned one other Urban Decay palette, and it was the Smoky palette, and I, again, didn't like those shadows. I didn't think they worked really well, but people said that the formula of that one wasn't as good as the other one, so I gave them another chance. None of the other Naked palettes really appealed to me, but this one I thought was very unique to my collection, and I am so glad I bought it. I love this palette. I love the shades, I love the tones, I love this like greenish yellow. I just think this is a great palette. I'm not a fan of this packaging. It kind of creeps me out. It kind of reminds me of like gold, like liquid gold, but not in like a good way. I don't know, it just freaks me out. I feel like someone could drown in it. It's just, it scares me for some reason. But yeah, this palette is gorgeous. Up next, I have a couple ColourPop palettes. So I used to own the My Little Pony palette, and that one was hit and miss, and the colors were all over the place, so I didn't really have a nice look that I could come up with it, unless you're into like just different colors and kind of shades that are a little like holographic almost. Then that palette would be great for you, but I ended up decluttering that one. But I do love their formula. That palette was hit and miss, but in general, their singles that I've owned before had been one of my favorite formulas ever. So this is another one of those palettes that I complimented on other people, and they kept telling me that they're wearing this palette, and so I just had to get it. And honestly, I love this palette, probably because it has those glitter shades in there, and I love glitter or shimmer on my lid, especially if it's very intense. So I absolutely love this palette. Up next, I have ColourPop's The Child palette, and I am obsessed with this palette. I just recently finished season 2, which, by the way, how cool was that? I was never a huge Star Wars fan. I tried to be because I wanted to be all cool when I was younger, but I was never really that into it. But I did enjoy, especially season 2 of The Mandalorian, and Baby Yoda, I mean, is just everything. But this palette is so nice. This is very unique to me. I don't really have a lot of greens, and I used this palette the other day, and I loved the way green shadows looked on my eyes. I have brown eyes, and they're pretty dark brown, and it just brought out like a little bit of like a hazel or green in my eyes, and I just thought it was so pretty. So I'm obsessed with this palette, not just because it has Baby Yoda on it, or Grogu should I say, but yeah, definitely an amazing palette. I highly recommend this one. Next, I have the Tati Beauty palette, and this is the newest palette to my collection, and wow. I am shocked at this palette. I wanted it for the glitters. I used it once for my birthday because my friend had it, and I wanted to use some glitter from her, and I was obsessed with the glitters, but who knew that the mattes would be as good as they are? So this shade is broken. They are sending me a new one. So I've just used this twice so far, and I mean, the glitters are amazing, but the mattes, they blend so nicely. They're so pigmented. They look so wonderful on the eyes. I am just shocked at the formula. Like, I knew people said it was good, and I took a while to get it because I just wasn't sure. You know, when you're getting a palette from a YouTuber and things like that, but this is incredible. I am shocked at this. This might be my new favorite formula and palette in general. It's very heavy, like it's good quality. So yes, I'm obsessed with this palette. It's currently my new favorite, besides Baby Yoda. I mean, nothing beats Baby Yoda, but yeah, such a good palette. The packaging does get dirty, which is unfortunate, but yes, this palette is amazing. Up next, I have the Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette. Initially, I wanted this really badly, and I did use it a decent amount. I will say that I do end up with a similar look every time because I just kind of stick to these transition shades, which in tone are very similar. I do need to play around with the color in this a little more. I think I took this to Europe once as one of my only palettes just because it had so many colors, and I did enjoy it. But it's not my like absolute favorite, but I do like this palette. I don't prefer big palettes like this though. I think this is honestly the biggest palette I have, which isn't that huge, but yeah. I also don't know if this is like the new formula or the old formula when there was all that drama going on, but yeah, it's okay. I do have this Singles eyeshadow palette that has some of the Balm's shadows. This is also one of my favorite formulas and one of the first ones that I ever started with. And this is the Meet Matrimony palette, I believe. And this red shade I had in a sample, and this is the first red shade that I ever started using, like every day. I used up the mini, and then I got this palette because of it. So this is one of those times that getting a mini eyeshadow in a subscription box made me buy the whole palette. But yeah, I love their formula. I also have this palette as well, which has some ColourPop shades. I believe these are ColourPop singles. Some are from the My Little Pony palette because I took out any ones that I really enjoyed. I think there's some other things in here, but I'm not 100% positive. I had some Storybook Cosmetics ones because those palettes are so bulky that I like to take them out of the palette, but they are not magnetic from what I remember, so I might have just decluttered them. But yeah, this has a lot of my ColourPop shades in here. Up next, I have this Ciate London palette. This was in BoxyCharm as well, I believe, and it looks like this. I do like this palette. I used it. Usually if there's a BoxyCharm palette that I don't really think I'll use, I steer clear of it and just give it away to someone or sell it, just whatever I can do with it. But this one I think is quite unique. I've used it once and I did enjoy it. I just have to play around with it a little more. Up next, I have the Bad Habit Aphrodite palette. This is a dupe for the Huda Beauty, was it the Rose Gold palette? This is a really nice palette. The only thing is you definitely have to do your eyes first because these shades are going to get everywhere. Like the shimmers are really, really, really intense and they're beautiful, but yes, you definitely have to do your eyes first because they are so powdery, they will get everywhere, but they do blend really nicely, so this is definitely a really nice dupe. I don't know if this exists anymore. Let me know if you know, but yeah, definitely a nice dupe. Then this is the Beauty Creations Tease Me palette. This, I guess you could say, is a dupe for the Huda Beauty kind of, I forgot what it's called. I'll put it up, but yeah, they say it's a dupe for that, but this one actually came out first. If anything, the Huda Beauty one is the dupe. But yeah, these are really, really pretty, but same situation as the other one. You do have to kind of do your eyes first, but honestly, these shades are like, they're so pretty. They're just very, very shimmery. Honestly, the camera can't do it justice, but yeah, these shades are amazing, and they do blend really nicely. In general, it's just a very pretty palette. Next, I have this one. This is the Queen Eloise palette. This was from BoxyCharm. I've only used this once, I believe. I do like the colors. It's a little too colorful for every day for me, but the formula is all right so far. I had to repress this one because it came broken, but yeah, I'll have to play around with this a little more. I don't remember being like completely in awe of it, but nothing negative to say about it. Just a basic formula, I would say. So yeah, I definitely have to play around with this a little more because it is a beautiful palette. Up next, I have the Juvia's Place Warrior palette. I did have one other Juvia's Place palette. I'll put a picture of it up, and I ended up selling it just because I couldn't get a nice look out of it. Like the colors were kind of all over the place. I couldn't just do a simple look with it, and the formula wasn't actually my favorite, but this one has shades that I would definitely use on a day-to-day basis, so that's why I picked it up. I do like this palette, but I will say it isn't my favorite formula of all time. I don't know why, because it is a nice formula and everyone raves about it, but maybe more so because of the colored shadows. I don't know. I do like this palette, but I wouldn't say it's like my favorite formula of all time. Up next, I have the Fenty Beauty Moroccan Spice palette. People didn't like this palette as much, but I actually really enjoyed it. This came in a BoxyCharm that was all Fenty Beauty, and I do actually really like this palette. I think I've, like I said, only used it once. I can't remember which shades I used, but yeah, I really liked the look that I came out with. It was very kind of natural, neutral, very just like pretty and classy, so yeah, I do like this palette a lot. Up next, I have the Urban Decay Moondust palette. This is a pretty palette, and I've used it a lot whenever I used to go to like a music festival or anything. This was my only kind of like glitter palette. The only thing is, these are not actually that great. Like, they're very not opaque. Like, you have to kind of pack them on with your finger to get anything out of it. I'm sorry if it's not focusing. I'm having a hard time with my camera. You probably can't tell, but yeah, it's not very intense or anything like that. So I can't remember why I liked this palette so much, but it is still pretty, and it's one of the oldest palettes in my collection, so I definitely just need to use it up, but the packaging is really, really pretty. Then I have this little guy, the Miami Eyeshadow Palette by Shayna B. This was from an Ipsy, I believe, as a free gift. Now, these shadows, I thought, originally I was just going to give it away, but I looked at the shadows and I was like, oh my goodness, these are gorgeous. Like, these shimmers, they were so soft, and they came out, like the swatches were so, so pretty. But on the eyes, it didn't translate that way. I've only used it once or twice, and both times I felt like the shadows swatched so nicely, but didn't really like translate that way on the eyes. So I'll have to play around with this a little more. But so far, I'm not a big fan of this, which is unfortunate. Then last but not least, I have the Shanxo, the Remix palette. She is an amazing YouTuber. Her first palette was eyeshadows on one side and lipsticks on the other. This one has the same eyeshadows, I believe, on one side, but then new eyeshadows on the other side. I can't remember which shadows came first, but yeah, it kind of looks like this. One shade fell out, which is very unfortunate because it was a very nice shade, but her formula is so good. I'm very impressed with her formula. I really like her shadows. I think is a very cohesive palette. So yeah, if you haven't tried out some of her makeup line, definitely check it out. She has her own makeup line, I believe, and then this palette's with BH Cosmetics, but yeah, such a great palette. I definitely recommend. I will really quickly just show you kind of how I organize things. So this is my vanity, and in this drawer I have all my Too Faced palettes. This is kind of the order of how I showed you them. And yeah, I just really like having them all here and organized. I think they look really pretty displayed. I also have a Too Faced bronzer in here. That'll be for a different collections video. And then over here, I have some of my favorite palettes. So I have, of course, all of my Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes, the Urban Decay. This is literally the order of how I showed you them. I have the Tati Beauty palette right underneath here, and everything else is just displayed. And then all the other palettes are up here, just in this little guy right here, because I use these a little less than the other ones. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.